Welcome to Biz Dev Live. I am so excited to bring you Anthony Vade today. We are going to talk about design. We're going to talk about structural change. We're going to talk about how events are successful when they are changing behaviors. We're going to get into MPI, Meeting Professionals International. We're going to get into ALIA. We're going to get into so many different aspects of the event and event design side of things today. Stay tuned. We'll be back with all that and more right after the Biz Dev theme.
Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. This is business development, not even selling it. This is intelligent. If you watch it, I promise you benefit. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration. Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T.
Anthony Vade, born and raised in Australia, Anthony now calls Toronto, Canada home. Proudly known as an instigator, creator, and change agent for over 20 years, he has helped event stakeholders create meaningful and memorable connections with attendees. He has worked with the largest audiovisual, event tech, and event production companies in the industry, designing and executing large-scale conferences, corporate and entertainment events in virtual, hybrid, and live scenarios. Anthony Vade continues to push experience design boundaries in his role as the North American director with an event design collective. Anthony's consultative and collaborative approach to customer engagement has resulted in thousands of successful events traversing 4 continents. Anthony Vade, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Cameron. I've been a long-time viewer, first-time caller. Great to be here. And I have to say that theme tune that you have, where did you get that from? Is that you? Is that a friend of yours? It's amazing.
So it's very easy to find out if you go down into the notes below each of the videos, because I have to give credit on YouTube to the gentleman that made it. But really, you know, when we're talking about small business, getting started, getting your media up, we're going to talk about event design today, getting your channel going, creating interactive and engaging pieces, things that sort of touch the 5 senses. You can create a theme song for your event for somewhere around $50 to $100 on Fiverr.com. Really easy to do. It takes a little time to figure it out, a little back and forth. It's not going to be something that somebody can go and do in 5 minutes, but you can get it done. And it's a lot easier than it sounds. And so I hope that you'll throw that into the mix as people are building and designing their events. Tell them, I got a genius that will give you the tip on how to do it.
Brilliant, mate. It's so good. And like you said, it's just that little bit of polish that adds all the difference. So
I gotta enhance the video. I'm lazy because I haven't updated the video, and there's so much that I could add to the video, and I hate doing post-production, which is why we are live today. So, and on the other side of that, because I'm talking about what I don't like, what I really do like about live is that there is the opportunity for people to jump in here live, ask us questions, and we can answer them in the moment. I'm still building up that following. I want to be the Gary Vee of this one day in terms of having, just a line out the door, whenever you jump on live. We'll get there one day, and I'll have you back on when we can really help a lot of people, because that's really my goal with this every single time, is to provide that kind of help very specifically to people so that they can design better events, design better businesses, and make the world truly a better place. So I gave you the fabulous introduction, but I want to kind of get in your own words what you're doing right now, and then we'll get into the background.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned in my bio, which one of my colleagues very generously wrote for me, it's a difficult task writing bios. So I recommend you get a friend to do it rather than try and do it yourself. But for many years, I've been involved in the events industry for about just over 20 years now, showing my age. And when I started out, I was pretty heavily focused in the production side of things, especially when it comes to technology and audio visual. And then over the years, I started to recognize that I had some natural talents or some skills in the design elements. And I got to activate some of the stuff that I went to university for, studying psychology, sociology, philosophy, and a bit of filmmaking as well. So as I was evolving out of my traditional technician style role, I started to embrace more and more design principles. And then slowly, as you get into design circles and you start to spend time with other designers, you get deeper and deeper, and it starts to grow. And lo and behold, in the last 5 years, I've been almost completely focused on taking design and, most importantly, building on that past that I have in technology, in app-based stuff, in hardware devices, and understanding, okay, what's the human-centric side of that? How can we design the way that we interact with those technologies, or the way those technologies are created to begin with, so that they better connect with the organic elements and the human mind, so that we can get more meaningful outcomes and we can bring about some positive behavior change through the experiences that we create with those technology elements. And I started to realize that there's a sea of different technologies out there, and we've seen over the last 12 months in particular a massive swelling in that ocean of different solution offerings out there. And the way that we're going to get to really how those products provide value in the long term and even in the short term is to understand their impact on human behavior and how we can manage human behavior so that we can encourage positive behavior traits, get people to act so that make the world a better place, and so we can manage the destructive, negative behavioral traits that human beings have that stop us from evolving and stop us from progressing to the betterment of everybody around us. So long story short, that's kind of how I got from being behind a mixing console as an audio and video engineer and ended up running design methodologies and design processes for event professionals, but also for business organizations that are looking to impart positive behavioral change through either events or just general communications and human resources programs that they have in place.
And talk to me why you got into tech. I know you talked about you got into you were getting into film production. Like, what drove you towards that side of the world to begin with?
I'd always been a creator. From a very young age, I was one of those crafty kids who was always drawing and painting and messing up my parents' house. You know, I always had the Legos, and I had different building blocks. I was kind of a constructor, always coming up with new things. And I went through the schooling system as we all do as children, and I didn't really connect within the schooling system. The systems and processes in place weren't aligned with the way that my brain worked. A bunch of dyslexia and ADHD going on. So I really struggled through school. But the one thing that remained consistent throughout my entire schooling and then moving into academic was that desire to create and to make things. And so I kept picking up new subjects and topics that aligned with that idea. Okay, how do I make things for humans? How do I understand humans better so that I can make better things for them? And that got me into different subjects that played with the human psyche. So filmmaking is a great example of that. And because when we go through a film experience, they tend to elicit emotional responses from us. They make us feel something. So I enjoyed studying that because I could combine those two elements. How do we create an artwork, a piece of something made for human beings? How do we understand human beings through that process? And so I got into film, and I got into radio and started putting on radio shows in similar respect. How do we connect human beings together through that medium and through that technology? And then slowly with film and radio, then I got into some events with the radio stations that I was working at and some of the other branding things that we were doing in the film industry. And all of a sudden, I got a job in a theater, and then I met someone else who was doing EDM raves and dance parties, and started working in rave dance parties, and my network started to expand out into all these different sectors.
Anthony, what I wouldn't give to see you throwing some glow sticks around right now.
Yeah. And you know, I was blessed. I got to work with some amazing DJs back in the day, and we were full rave central. But it wasn't really that I ever had this defined goal that, hey, I'm going to get into this. It's kind of one door opened, and because of the way I am, I stepped into it. And that opened up a whole new room full of other things that I could explore. And then that led to more doors, to more things. And the one constant was if I'm making something and I'm enjoying making that thing, then I'm going to keep exploring that space and keep seeing how I can get deeper into it. And that's what headed me once again away from the technology once I was in the events industry, because I thought, okay, I can make good technology and I can make a cool looking show, but I want to make things for humans. So I shifted into that design area full time, especially now in 2021 with a very heavy focus in that. And I want to now start to share that out there and say, okay, event professionals and business professionals in general, you too can become experienced designers, and you can create experiences and make things for humans like I love to do. And so I've started to give that out as well, not only as a consultant who can provide experience design services and facilitate that process, but really we are focused in the Event Design Collective in educating the industry in how to do that themselves with our event design certificate program. So that, because we think there's a lot of opportunity here, especially in this time of disruption, to be able to embrace some of these elements and make more things for more human beings and less things for computers.
I love that. Now, one of the things that I know very much about you right now, you have right back behind you, you have diagrams, right? You're a big diagram guy, right? So talk to us about the value of diagrams and why you have so much of that in the work that you do.
So there's a couple of reasons behind that. Firstly, the methodology is.
And I gotta say, just before you get started, it always looks freaking cool.
It helps, right? And there is some cool factor to it when you're trying to bring people into a methodology or into a process, especially if they've never participated in a methodology before. If they haven't done design thinking or any of those elements before, then you do need some cool factor to kind of draw them in. But the other thing that the reason we use a lot of visual communications tools is we are an international movement. So we have language barriers. Now we have all of our canvases translated into other languages, but the real goal of the event canvas methodology is to create a common language that transcends regional dialects. And we feel that the visual communication tool achieves that really, really well. And you know, there's the Tom and David Kelly from IDEO said something like, if a picture speaks 1,000 words, then an effective prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. So we've really embraced that, and we tried to bring a visual way of communicating that is both can be done on a screen, or we could pick up some post-it notes, you know, the design thinker's best friend, and create a tactile way of interacting in that visual medium as well. So there's something that happens when the body gets up and plasters things on the walls, as opposed to writing in a notebook or try to do things via a computer interface. So we have a whole bunch of different canvases that achieve different things throughout the phases of the methodology, but they're all designed to activate the brain in a very specific way that's going to bring about one output from that individual, but also contribute to the entire team aligning towards that common goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, and you know, I do a lot of conferences on a normal year. 2020 was a little bit different, and 2021 is starting off that way. I know you've done a ton of virtual events. So what has been, because, you know, you talk about like the tactile, right? So we're posting things up, and I've definitely done the conferences, having the visual stimulation, having all of the components where you got the team building and we're all writing on the wall. I know there's some online tools. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, you know, because we're going to go back to the physical. So maybe we talk about the physical a little bit, about the value of that, and then how maybe you've seen some of the success bringing some of those techniques and some of the things, because I know one of the benefits of virtual is that you can do some things, you know, in this virtual environment that you can't do in the physical environment.
Yeah. So So it's funny because we were, and the Event Design Collective has been encouraging people since the world went into lockdown to sort of try and apply a digital first mindset. In that we were doing things digitally beforehand. A big chunk of our process was facilitated online prior to the pandemic anyway, so it wasn't a huge shift for us. We did lose our in-person elements, but luckily for us, we already lived and we already had an ecosystem online. And so we were doing a lot of things already with microsite websites. We've been Zoom users since before 2014, like one of the first times that Zoom really fired up. And we're also a partner with a whiteboarding tool called mural.co. So we do a lot of our digital whiteboarding in that system with Zoom meetings, and we use Zoom breakouts because luckily for us, the rest of the world now is pretty well adept at getting onto a Zoom meeting. So we've tried to keep that adoption curve in place because, hey, if they're there already, keep them in that ecosystem. Now,
well, I love the fact that, and people have mentioned this, is 2020 provided Zoom training for the world. So now everybody's on that same page, right? That's been the benefit. So now we have a common place so that, you can take your event. I was doing event camps back in 2010, and we were talking about all this hybrid stuff, but because so many people really weren't trained and made aware that this was a good secondary option if you were stuck in Europe and couldn't get to South America for, the big Nabisco, South America conference, the hybrid option just didn't seem like that viable of a thing. Now the whole world's been on Zoom training. So you can say, listen, we're going to provide this really great in-person experience, and we're going to make this equitable and make sure that we provide a human engagement, friendly experience that is inclusive of all our folks that may not be able to travel for whatever reason. We've gotten that training in, which I think is such a big deal. Sorry to interrupt you, but I thought that was something that, for everybody that's designing events, is like, hey, you've been given a favor. Obviously we got it the hard way, but this has been a favor for the events industry in a lot of ways to provide a more equitable and a more inclusive landscape.
And it also, and there are some things that we can't replicate, and we need to be okay with that. There's some elements, we talk a lot about the challenges around engagement and networking, and how do you get that level of intimacy between the attendees when they are separated by time and space in many respects. So we started experimenting very early on in how we're going to adapt our programming for our event design certificate programs. And part of that, we wanted to bring in some of those. Well, we wanted to trial how we can bring some of those tactile and interpersonal elements into the programming. So we send out recipe recommendations for when we do lunch breaks, so we can all go and make a sandwich together and then share why that sandwich is special to us. Cocktail recipes for the closing night party. Our mastermind program kicked off with everybody receiving a personalized podcast for that one attendee that they could put their headphones on, take their dog or their kids out for a walk around the neighborhood and start to absorb some of the content and thinking that was going to happen during the course. So we try to come up with different sensory ways to start activating people's brains as well, even though we recognize that there was a bit of a roadblock in the digital infrastructure that was going to cause us to not be able to get some of those interpersonal, some of those intimacy type scenarios going on. So we started experimenting, and we've gotten really good net promoter scores out of it. And we've invited our attendees on that experimentation journey with us and said, hey, let's co-create this new experience together. Here's some of the ideas we have of how we can make this a meaningful experience. Do you have ideas as well? And we actually start most of our workshops now mapping out the experience journey with those attendees. Like, do you have ideas of what else we could put in there? Yes, we have our structure, but in this time and place, as we shift to digital first, there's a great opportunity here to sort of let down some of that ego and say, come to our event, participate in this training online. We don't have all the answers. We have a great framework and we have a great structure, but let's talk about how you, the attendee, can contribute to this being a meaningful experience in your way, and perhaps we'll adopt that for our program in the future.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're meeting people where they are, right? You know, the idea of creating a podcast, I think, is amazing. I don't think something that most event marketers, event creators are thinking of. I think, you know, we're still in a lot of ways, even me, you know, thinking about the future as I build this BizDev Live brand and bring it to live events. It's not something that I immediately go to, even though this is my world, right? You know, this is YouTube, and, you know, it's podcasting, and it's, you know, creating that audio and visual content. So putting those pieces together to enhance the physical experience. I think going back to event camp, there were some things that, you know, were really innovative and really cool that touched on a lot of different senses that I still don't see a lot of event producers creating. One of the things with Adrian Seeger, he put together a Facebook, if you will, of all of the faces of the people based on like their Twitter or LinkedIn profiles on a paper, you know, with just a one-line thing. As you walk into the event, you're getting this thing with this visual kind of indication, so you could put the, you know, people that you are meeting online. And, you know, when we think about like physical materials, there was a big movement, like everything's going to be digital. For me, having something meaningful that's printed out, not something that can be, you know, that's just reference information that I just need in this second, and then I don't ever need it again, like which room to go to or whatever. But, you know, resource note-taking material that I can actually use to mind map and relationship make, those are incredibly meaningful tools. And I'm starting to see, you know, some of the online tools and some of the apps sort of take that approach and connecting the social media profiles and making it really brain friendly. But we need a lot more of it.
Yeah, we do. And it's funny, you look at established online programs, and I recently went through Seth Godin's old MBA program, which was fascinating, just an amazing experience.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that. That's something that sounds amazing.
And that's a program that has been digital first from the very start of that. I think they've got 46 or 47 cohorts have been through the program now, but they still send out a book pack for you with physical books, where you get a big stack of actually tactile, open it up and have a read kind of books. And even though we work, that's also run in Zoom, and they use Discourse for the typing and the project submission and prompts and all those elements, and Slack for stream of consciousness and communication channel. But they still send out a book for you to work through, to understand what are the elements, who's been through it, and who are part of the community. They send you another.
While we got this view, can you walk people through? I love that you showed us your setup. So I love that you're telling us, but I'd love you to walk us through your setup as well. I love the books that they're sending you with the program.
Yeah, so there's both the reading material, there's both get your head around, you know, the concepts and the theory behind what we're doing in the course, and then they also provided a workbook, and they recommended to everybody, hey, I know you're going to be tempted to type this into your computer because you have to submit it eventually anyway into Discourse to be commented on and all those good things that happen in that program, but they still said to you, as tempting as it is to do it once, please try and get a pen and paper and write it down, because once again, there's something that happens with the mind when you're made to do a physical. And that's similar to my space here that I have laid out. I have my area that's, please excuse the mess, but I have my room laid out on this side.
Your area looks amazing compared to mine.
So this side of the room is all digital first. Everything on this side is some sort of digital interface. And then if we spin around to this side of the room, everything here is analog. So what I do routinely is shift between the digital thinking and the way that we interact and activate our brain with digital tools. And then I'll turn around, and either on my canvases here that go through the different steps, I'll then get a tactile element in. So I may actually take the audience through Mural, looking at the different ways that we use that for whiteboarding. But then as we go through some of the steps in the methodology, I may turn around, depending on how the team's doing digital first, and actually interact and do physical writing and come over to flip charts on the walls here so we can make lists, so that we kind of break that and get a bit more analog, because the digital side of things is really good for the neocortex part of our brain that likes process and linear, whereas the analog, the tactile, the physical is more about the limbic system, how we can unlock the emotional side of our brains. And to create behavioral change, we need both parts of the brain. So if we can build that into our design process from the very, very get-go, it gives us the opportunity to be conscious of that stuff as we design experiences for other people who are going to attend our events, our meetings, our team building exercises, or whatever those kinds of events may be.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So you said successful events in our pre-game talk here before we jumped on. Successful events are ones that change behavior. So talk to us a little bit about that in terms of, how do you set that up from the get-go to change behaviors? How do you talk to organizations about what behaviors they actually want to change? And then how do you actually implement that through the design process?
It's always a tricky conversation. Some organizations understand that key to performance, especially to high level performance and to growth performance, you need to understand the behaviors of your of various stakeholders, whether those are the people within your business that are delivering the services, your sales force, your customer success managers. You need to manage their behaviors to make sure they are selling, to make sure they're connecting with their customer in meaningful ways. That's why we have annual sales conferences, and that's why there's sales training systems in place. But also you need to understand what the customer's mind is as well, and how you're trying to manage their behaviors so that they either buy from you, they trust you, or that they're willing to invest more in you, depending on what your offering is. And those two kinds of stakeholders have different behaviors that are related to each other. But if we influence one, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to influence the other one. Just because you make your sales team better at selling doesn't guarantee your customer is going to be ready to be sold to in that way. So what organizations are realizing is that we need to design the experience on both sides, and we need to understand the behavior on both sides at a deep level, so that when we then map the next steps in that journey, we know the steps that each stakeholder needs to play, the role that they need to have in creating that change that's going to improve the outcome for both. Pretty theoretical.
Yeah, no, I'm because I think you have a tendency to get heady, and I'm going to try to bring it down to what I understand. But this idea of I joined Master Networks, which is it's a networking association, very much like BNI, a little bit different. And one of the things that they talk about in terms of behaviors that they're trying to change or influence with what they're doing is this bond process. So instead of when, you get on a one-on-one call, I'm just going to pitch you, hey, Anthony, I have this product that I'm selling. Can you buy it from me? This kind of thing, right? The idea is that we're talking to each other about each other's story, our background. What drives us, why we are, who we are, what is our kind of our founding piece, how we were made, right? And so if I spend a few minutes telling you about my background and kind of what makes me me, and you spend a few minutes talking about what makes you you, we'll find commonality. We'll be able to develop things based off of that, and even develop business opportunities, because I'm more than just a hospitality guy. I have a hospitality business since 2011, right? And I have this Dev Live that I've been really focused on since sort of the second quarter of 2020. And so 177 videos later, Biz Dev Live, right? So what can we start? And so one of the things that I noticed, because I just joined this organization in December of 2019, is that inside of this organization, the behavior has changed. When I get on a one-to-one call with somebody that's in a Master Networks, they're ready for that conversation. The behavior has changed. Now, I've changed. That's definitely been my focus. But when I go and meet with somebody outside of the organization that isn't a Master Networks member, that conversation, especially in some cases for folks that are very driven on, they want to, they're very focused on selling or pitching. They're not comfortable with sharing their story, which would probably, at least in my mind, be the optimal thing so that we could develop relationships so that I remember you, because maybe I'm not going to buy your product today, but maybe I know somebody who will.
Yeah.
Or I know somebody else that can help you with something else going on in your life because I have a lot of connections, right? And you probably have somebody in your life that connect with me with some of the things that I'm working on. I got nonprofit over here. I'm father of 4 kids. I always need resources on that end, right? There's always something. So that's sort of how I'm sort of hearing the conversation is that, right, you have within your event, within your organization, some behaviors, but you have that disconnect between what's going on in this world and the outside world. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And in a lot of the sales organizations that I've been part of in the past, and a lot of the training that I've been through, they talk about the high performance delta. And I don't know if you've come across this. We're big fans of deltas in the Event Design Collective, but they talk about the A, the B, and the T, with A being the attitude, B being the behaviors, and T being the technique or the tool.
Yeah.
And there's a tendency in business, and when we're trying to optimize team performance, to focus on the tools. Do we have enough sell sheets? Do we have the right script in place? Is our sales team ready to go to market with that stuff? And every failed salesperson, the first thing that they'll say to you is, "Yeah, can I get a brochure on that?" And every deal that's not going to close normally ends with an email or a phone conversation where the prospect says to you, "Okay, can you just send me an email with a PDF or something in it?" Probably not going to close. We focus a lot on tech and tools, and they are organizationally expensive to develop, to deploy, and to manage, because their success is normally dictated by the other 2 elements. They're normally dictated by the behaviors and the attitudes of that salesperson or that relationship owner. And this is what communications departments and HR departments do really well. They're really good at managing the human side of things. And so by investing in designing experiences and investing in events that can help to manage people's attitudes and their behaviors, you get better performance out of the tools that are in place, because they stop falling on the tools as the crutch for their lack of performance.
I love that.
Yeah.
You hear that.
It can change,
you hear
right?
that all the time.
Yeah. We're talking about changing behaviors once again at that point. When we're understanding the behaviors, so why the methodology, I'm so passionate about the methodology, is because it gets us to the core of understanding where we're at. It gets us a baseline. Okay, what are the behaviors now? What are the attitudes? And what tools and techniques exist from the past? What events have we done? What internal training have we done? What success did that have? Where are we at now? And then where do we want to be? And let's start looking past that short-term horizon and look a bit further towards the experiences and the moments that we can create from here on that can incrementally bring about improvements in people's attitudes, their behaviors, and their techniques to bring about better business outcomes for the major stakeholders.
And what I hear is, what are you doing to bring value, right? So let's say you're an event designer, you're in an organization, you have an event coming up, and you want people to click on it, register, actively engage, participate, show up, be present. Yeah. It comes down to that value thing, right? So, what attitudes and behaviors are you demonstrating? And when I was saying I hear that all the time, I hear it all the time in that, it's very difficult. We need a better thing, a better doodad, because people are busy and we're just not able to attract people. And my response is usually something along the lines of, everyone's busy all the time. They were busy in, 1850. they're busy today. Yeah. In 2021. The thing that's going to make somebody make your event, your meeting, your time a priority on their calendar is that they see the value, so that the attitude and the behavior reflects that there's actually value there and that they're going to get something that is meaningful. Because, you know, if you tell everybody we're going to have an event and Beyonce and J-Lo and Steve Jobs and Gary Vee are all going to be made available to you, you're going to drop everything and you're going to make sure that you're there no matter what's on your schedule. I don't care, your kids, your cat, your dog, your boss, your court, like you're going to make it a priority. And obviously there's some exceptions and whatever to that rule, but basically the bottom line is if there's somebody that's important enough to you or there's something important enough to you, you're going to do that. So when you don't have J-Lo and your titans of industry, I think I said Steve Jobs, who's dead, but you know, Elon Musk or somebody of that caliber ready to be made available at the event, what are you doing? What tools are you showing? What attitude and behavior have you shown through value that you've been able to change? And other folks, what's the social proof? And I think that's a big deal with, for me, and this sort of gets us into the conversation around, talking about the tools and whatnot, because I see so many people, whether it's in the event design space or the social media space, they're doing certain things and I'm saying, not as a social media person, but as somebody that's just doing social media because I have something that benefits from it, this YouTube channel and the events that I'm putting on. I'm seeing, later.com, and there's the link in bio, and this is a really cool tool. And here's somebody that supposedly does social media for a living, but they haven't posted since November. So what can I do to help them in their industry? So I am about, bringing value and making sure that people are doing the right thing. They're promoting themselves, their personal brand. How do we, get these behaviors and attitudes to change? I'm trying to give you a helping hand, whether it's just on a one-to-one phone call or within the confines of an event where that's what we're supposed to be doing, motivating and inspiring you to do a better job. How do we change those behaviors?
Yeah, and the key to that is understanding those behaviors, because as I said, the behaviors are different for the different stakeholders. So what your CEO wants out of the experience is probably different to what your frontline staff wants, and then probably different again to what the directors in the middle want. So you need to find a way through the process and through the design strategy of aligning those three different viewpoints and perspectives on the world towards that common goal that you have. And the most important thing that we build through the entire design methodology that we have is the measurements of success. So if we understand that the CEO, that the C-suite, the CEO, the CMO, and the CFO want these things, how will we measure that they have achieved those behavioral changes and that they've gotten what they wanted? How do we measure what the director level, the people in the middle who are managing, wrangling resources, money, the framework, the constraint that we have to work within, how are we communicating with them so that we're not using the same language that we're using with the C-suite? Because C-suite's generally big level, high level strategy, 10,000 feet stuff. The middle are a bit more around the constraint and the parameters that you need to work within, and they're worried about going over budget. They're worried about not getting the outcomes and all those kinds of things, and they're the ones getting pressured from the C-suite to perform. And then your front line is just worried about how the hell are we going to actually do this thing? So they're really in the execution mindset, and they're getting inundated from left, right, and center. So these three different stakeholder levels just within one organization, not even looking at the other stakeholders outside, have different priorities and different perspectives on what the event or whatever you're doing is going to achieve. So by building out the methodology in the way that we have, we allow each of those players to contribute their viewpoint and their perspective. We always validate that viewpoint and perspective if we are empathizing with them to make sure that we got it right. And then we are getting them to commit at that early stage that this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to measure if we've been successful in that or not. And this is what you can expect as the executive sponsor, or whatever the role is. This is what you can expect your return to be for the level of commitment that you make into this project. And it
what,
really,
what I heard here, and it goes to your point of design as a team sport, is getting people involved at every level, first of all, that are understanding of what those communication goals are for that particular subset, for the C-suite, so they see the big picture piece, for the middle management that understands how to manage it, how to understand the budgeting and the overall management of the really strategic and tactical details, and then your final subset of the actual, hey, this is how you do it. This is the buttons you push. This is the places you call, and this is how you measure, right?
Right.
And then bringing this over, for all my small business folks and entrepreneurs that are in that solopreneur world. If you're trying to gain friends and influence people, so to speak, pulling other people in, so it's not just your voice, so that you can provide a united defense. So let me get so-and-so. So it's not just me saying it. I'm going to get Anthony Vade to give you a phone call. I'm going to get you Liz King Caruso to give you a phone call on this and tell you the value of this, so that we're bringing our forces to bear here, so that you get the social proof of it, whether that's within the organization or maybe just you trying to give somebody a lifeline and give them a helping hand. Because I think sometimes we feel like, and I know I definitely get into this, where it's like, hey, I have a solution, I have a key, but we forget that there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of competing voices, and you may be hearing something completely different from somebody else. Or you may have invested time and effort into the way that you're doing things right now in this moment. And so how do we get you to understand that there's a different way? It's going to be different. It reminds me, with the nonprofit that I work with, that understanding that we know adults for teenagers are not the central influencer in their lives. We know that peer-to-peer influence is a lot more important, which, funny enough, carry that forward 10, 20, even 30 years. We know that peers basically run folks' mindset. So that's who you really need to influence if you want to influence a person. But on the high school level, we know it's not the one adult that's going to be able to speak to 30 kids and make a difference. It's getting 30 kids to focus on, each other in the sense of, hey, come on, let's do it. This is where we're going. And that really carries people forward. So building those peer groups, I think that's one of the reasons that masterminds and success circles are so important and influential, because that way you get the team really bringing in the design element of changing behavior, which I wouldn't have pulled together without speaking to you right now, Anthony Vade. So very meaningful today.
And I'd like to build on your point, because you're talking about perspective there, and you're talking a perspective at a level, which is a lot of the challenge. And the example I always give in the event business is it's like the event planner walking into the CMO's office and going on and on about when the coffee is going to get refreshed and how many muffins have been ordered. And the CMO does not care about the muffins as much as you want them to care about the muffins. They just go, no, I get it. Are the muffins going to be in the room? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I don't care if they're blueberry or chocolate chip.
As long as they have a muffin, they don't care.
No, I have bigger fish to fry than to worry about these muffins. I need to create more adoption. I need to create more sales, or whatever they may be. And so what the event planner is sabotaging themselves by having this kind of conversation. And all of a sudden the CMO is thinking, does this person have it in order? Why do they keep coming to me about muffins when I'm more worried about this part of the event? So what we're trying to do is teach the industry to recognize different perspectives, and then adjust your focus and your language to communicate with those individuals at their level with the things that are important to them, and not waste time with conversations that aren't important to that individual in that time and place.
It's so tough to do, right? Organizing your mind to really focus on the appropriate audience in the moment. I think for senior salespeople, for folks that are leaders within organizations that have done it for 20, 40 years, that kind of thing, they've sort of gotten it, hopefully, and are able to code switch in the moment and make sure that they can speak the right language to the right level of person in the moment. But it's a challenging thing to do, and especially as we get so excited.
Yeah.
Right. We have something that we think is incredibly important. It's our widget. We're very excited about it. And so understanding when to talk about what to whom is such a big, challenging thing, but so effective if we're able to master it.
Yeah.
What do you do in terms of figuring that out for organizations that are trying to provide messaging within events?
One of the key things that we do lies within the process. So the steps within the process are very focused. Okay, can we achieve deep empathy? Can we get the team members that are part of this design process? And as we mentioned earlier, design is a team sport. So the first thing we do is we get more than one perspective involved in the process. If you put all the same personality types into a room, you'll get one outcome, you'll get one result, you'll get one perspective. And there's not one person attending your event. That's a solo enterprise, and we have a different name for that. But in this case, you want more perspectives, because more than one perspective will be experiencing whatever you're designing. So that's the first step. We bring them in, and then we use the steps within the process to unlock that deep empathy, because empathy is hard. I mean, you touched on it. It's not a natural state for us, especially when we're in a state of stress. There's been a bunch of studies done recently on the destructive nature of cortisol on the prefrontal cortex. I don't want to get too deep into the neuroscience. There's a cool, I think it's a HBO special, One Nation Under Stress. Really good special that talks about, okay, that cortisol release that happens in our brain actually damages the prefrontal cortex and stops us from empathizing with other human beings. So we fall into this destructive pattern of in conflict where we don't see the other person's perspective. And we constantly hear event planners pre-pandemic, top 5 most stressful jobs in the world. And we're telling them at the same time, you need to empathize better because it's key to your job. And yet, in some respects, they are brain damaged and can't do it. So we use the process and we nurture them through that process to try and overcome that and get them to reignite that part of their brain. Because the good thing about the prefrontal cortex is it's pretty good at rebuilding itself. Neural pathways are very adaptive within that space. So by going through these steps of deep empathy, getting out of our own heads, getting out of our day-to-day stuff that's weighing down.
I'm just going to throw in there rest, relaxation, meditation. When you're angry, it's tough to be empathetic.
Yeah.
So getting yourself out of that state, I just went through that over the weekend with something going on in the family, and it was very tough for me to be empathetic with this family member because of how I was feeling. So I think it's the same is true for any kind of interpersonal stuff. You're dealing with attendees, you're dealing with stakeholders. Getting into that happy place before you have that next conversation will allow you to do what we were talking about before, which is speak the right language to the right people so you can get the results that you need. Yeah, keep going. Sorry, Anthony. But I thought that was
so we built into the entire process throughout all the steps within it, moments to reconnect with that, moments to sort of take a breath and give space for that, and give some tools and techniques and some, once again, language that a facilitator, we're turning planners into designers. So language that the designers can use to make sure that the team can overcome some of those hurdles and can unlock that empathy and connect with those stakeholders. And then, as I suggested, there's always a validation step after that, because we don't want to assume that we got it right when we didn't. And then from all of that deep empathy and change and frame mapping that happens within the canvas, we create what we call the event narrative. That's the story about how the event creates value for its stakeholders. and how we're going to measure how successful it was. All the stuff we talked about to this point. It's a nice, succinct statement. We like to say a minute and a half if you can do it, or a single page document that we can then take to that stakeholder group and validate. And we can say, hey, CMO and C-suite, we think you feel this way about the event. Is that a fair statement? Did we get it right? And we have to be ready for that generous criticism to come back at us and say, yes, we did or we didn't. We go to the other stakeholder group. Did we get this right? Get their feedback, and we adapt our narrative at that point, the story around why the event creates value or the experience creates value. And then we design to that narrative. We have a tendency to rush to the solution. I think you kind of hinted at that with the last statement, that we want to solve the problem. We're presented with a problem quick. People are uncomfortable and unhappy, solve their problem. But what real designers do is they wallow in the mud. They hang out on that problem, and they really get to the core of why the problem exists before they start to design the solution.
It reminds me of people, me speaking with my wife. I am very solution oriented. So immediately she's speaking, I'm presented with a challenge or a problem. I want to stop her and I want to give a solution, but that wasn't the problem.
Correct.
The problem was that she needed to vent. The problem was that she needed an outlet. She didn't need me to come up with some magic solution. The problem was she needed somebody to listen to her.
Yeah.
And so, that is sort of the whole ballpark, the whole game with so many institutional challenges. We are talking about, if organizations want to change their culture, they need systems and processes. And this uniquely human thing, this thing that I outlined between my wife and I, is something that happens every day within organizations. Sometimes the manager doesn't need to come up with a solution.
Yeah.
They just need to listen so that their employee or their team member has an outlet so that they can get that off their chest, let the stress go, and focus on delivering really great outcomes for the project, for the organization, for the event. So speaking to that, how do you change the culture? How do you create those systems and processes for the organization so that they can understand things like empathy and create deeper, more involved organizations?
There is no one easy answer to that question, unfortunately.
I figured.
because every sales organization, every business is slightly different. But what we like to say is the first step that every organization needs to take is allocating both time and team. You need to put resources towards shifting and bringing about improvement cultures. You can't have an improvement culture without an effective process and methodology to improve your organization. Now, that could be project management. People use Six Sigma. There's lean methodologies. There's tons of different methodologies out there. Business model generation. There's lots of ways you can bring your team together around process and methodology to improve your organization. But if you don't allocate the team, the time, and the resources, and do that intentionally over a longer period of time, it will not become a part of culture, because you can't. There's a great sales quote. I think it was a David Sandler quote, who said, and in fact, I think he even named his book it, "You can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar." And we tend to think that, okay, if we put on the annual sales conference, or now we put on the annual virtual event for our sales team, that window of 4 hours that they're in the event space is going to solve all of our problems. But more often, whatever change we're trying to create within the organization, it's going to take multiple touch points. It's going to take an extended experience journey, as we call it, and it's going to need to be aligned to the instructional design as well, so that all of those touch points over the lifespan of whatever that change is, that new innovation, or how that company is constantly evolving, all the touch points reinforce that behavioral change and in a positive way, so that people feel rewarded, they feel nurtured, they feel comfortable with change, because change is uncomfortable. So we need to find a way to allow them to embrace the discomfort, alleviate the discomfort, and then nurture them into that positive change through the experience.
Yeah, I think that's really incredible. And when you talk to folks that, are speaking on emotional intelligence, that's exactly what they're saying, right? They're saying you need to find ways for you to get into a room, have the discomfort, have the conversation, so that it can actually be worked out. You can't unknot the knot without actually working the knot. It's just what it is, right?
And really set up and ask for permission for that stuff, right? The beauty of it is, if you don't have a design culture now, you can start one tomorrow. And when you start it, you can go into it with that open, vulnerable mindset. And you can say to the team, hey, we want to start some improvement culture stuff. We've never done design before. If you want to be part of this, come into it, and we expect you to be open, honest, transparent. We will be that with you. It may be uncomfortable. Tell people this could be a very uncomfortable meeting at the start, and you watch them. They'll close over, but slowly they'll start to open up, and through that different dynamic within that space, and there's a bunch of different strategies we could talk about. I don't want to get too deep into it, but by creating that space, that safe space for people to embrace some of this design stuff, you can find that clarity, and you can find that voice that the people need to open up, and you can start to align them towards that linear path.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so we're getting close to the top of the hour here. I wanted to bring in MPI and ALEA, two organizations that we share membership in, to talk about kind of the value to you that you've gotten over the years, but also you're a part of MPI. Is it BC, British Columbia?
I think I'm now technically Toronto. I don't know. I've moved
MPI Toronto, County K, and those folks up there. So talk to me about the relationship that you've had with MPI, ALEA, the value that you've had, and if you have anything coming up with them, if there's any events, and then we'll kind of get into how folks can get in touch with you.
Yeah. Look, I can't speak highly enough about industry associations. When I first moved over to Canada in around 2010, I had very little network. I didn't know anybody. I had a stacked resume, like I mentioned. I'd worked in a lot of really interesting events and lots of great artists and corporate events over the years, but nobody would give me an interview. I couldn't get in with anyone because no one knew who I was. So I realized at that point I needed to build a network. So education and everything else that these associations do is amazing and worth the value of the membership. But what ALEA and MPI in particular gave me was the ability to reach out to people who I didn't know, form relationships, form communities, and start dialogues with them so that I could build a network, get some credibility behind me through volunteership with chapter boards, national boards, global boards, so that they knew me not only as a contributor to the industry, not only as a supplier or a consultant within the industry, but they knew me as somebody who believed in the industry and was doing things to progress the industry. And so that really helped to elevate my position and expand my networks. So if you haven't jumped on with an association, I recommend you do it, but I recommend you do it and get involved, ideally at a chapter level. If not, start contributing to that, because the relationships you build around creating things together are much more meaningful than a transactional sales-based conversation at a networking event.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Anthony. Thank you for that. I think that's so important. Definitely changed my life, my career trajectory once I joined MPI, and have created so many great relationships that carry into so many different parts of my life with the association. So thanks for talking about that. I think that's really important for anybody that isn't already a member of an association to really take it up. And then if you are a member of an association, sort of following Anthony's advice in the sense that, maybe you've been a member at large, actually getting involved in the board level, getting involved on a committee, that's really where the magic and the real structure of relationship starts to happen, where your behavior and other people's behavior really starts to change around you. So you really get into that organizational development, even within your own network, which I think is incredible. And if you're trying to carry some of these principles forward for a larger organization, it definitely starts with yourself first. I think that's where it all starts. The personal brand goes into the business brand. So that's the way to do it. So I have your LinkedIn down below on YouTube. It's off to the side on Facebook. Talk to people about how they can get in touch with you besides LinkedIn, because we have those links there, what websites they should be visiting, and who are the people that you would most like to connect with, Anthony?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on. So February 8th, I am running one of our Event Design Collective taster sessions. It's a 90-minute session where people can pop on in and get an overview of the methodology, go a little bit deeper than we went into here, obviously, and we're going to look at co-creating that experience as well. So there's going to be a few different prototypes. We love prototypes in the Event Design Collective. I'm going to throw a few different prototypes out to that audience who joins us, and we're going to see what kind of experience that session turns into. So that's February 8th, and you can find all of our online training programs at edco.global, and you can navigate through to our events page and find a bunch of different useful information there. As you said, reach out to me on LinkedIn, ask some questions coming in. We're meeting with MPI very soon to work on our 2021 strategy. So there'll be more stuff coming through MPI channels. And I guess, reach out. In fact, I'll put a special offer out to everybody watching this, who watches this video and wants to attend the February 8th session. I'm willing to do a special deal with people at the moment. If they buy the book online or they have a copy of the book, they can get into my session free of charge and use the promo code TASTY for our tasting session. And
so say the book one more time.
So it's this book, Event Design Handbook, which was the book that we originally wrote when we came up with the methodology. So if you pick up a copy of that, and that's available on the website or Amazon, then you can get a free ticket using the promo code TASTY to the February 8th tasting session.
Beautiful. I just threw that into the chat so that people will see that on YouTube and Facebook.
And there's the website. So yeah, you can check that out.
Who are the people that you most want to connect with, Anthony?
So most of the people that are really getting into this design methodology at the moment are event planners looking to level up. Ones that have been struggling to get a seat at the strategy table. Ones that don't quite have that relationship with the C-suite that they're looking for with their clients. So they're the ones that really will get a lot very fast out of learning the methodology, give them a better way to articulate their value and get some more respect within their organization. And the other extreme is those just entering the industry that are looking to embrace design thinking as a way to create events in the future, and those that are ready to come into the industry with a skill set that many of those already in the industry don't have. So those are the two groups that really are getting a lot out of it. But really, it's open to anybody. It doesn't matter.
I'm going to push you a little bit more. What's the title of the folks that you're most often dealing with that really appreciate your work the most?
Yeah, it's mostly event planners or meeting managers. And certainly those entry-level coordinators as well are the ones that really get a lot out of it. That being said, we've also had quite a few CMO type people, high-level marketing people that have gone through the program because they've recognized there's some valuable elements within the process that can work on that experience design side of things and marketing strategy as well. So we've had quite a few of those kinds of people come in, and also facilitators.
Yeah, I would imagine, like, if I could make up a title, human engineers, right? The folks that are interested in really making sure that the events, experiences that people are designing are really interacting and engaging the folks in a way that changes behaviors. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Anthony. I'm going to let you have a closing statement here. Tell everybody about the February 8th event. Again, the book, the offer, and I'll close this out with the BizDev thing. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you. Okay, I'll close you out with and remind you of the 3 core principles behind what the Event Design Collective does. 1, we want to enable you to consciously design your events with intention and purpose. We want you to be able to come up with a meaty, meaningful event story and narrative that articulates how your event creates value. And 3, we want you to be able to align your team towards that common goal together. That's what the methodology can do, and that's how it can help you out. And Cameron touched on this before, and you said it even without me prompting you. Why we believe now's the time to do this is because we need to change some behaviors, and you can't change the behaviors of others until you first change your own. So please come and check out the Event Design Collective and the Event Canvas, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks, Anthony.
Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. This is business development, not even selling it. This is intelligent. If you watch it, I promise you benefit. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration. Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11